And welcome back. Every Sunday here on WCVB, Soledad O'Brien looks into the issues impacting America, both on a political and a personal level, on her show Matter of Fact. I recently had the chance to speak with her here in our newsroom about this particular moment in the election cycle and the role of undecided voters.
I think there are lots of people who are actually single issue voters, right? And I think people are waiting to hear a thing from a candidate. It's a very small number of people. I don't think it's this massive number. And I've always been perplexed by those voters like, oh my gosh. Most of them, the ones that I've interviewed, which is a very small sample size, actually are very engaged. I used to think, are you just not listening at all to anything you're hearing at all? And that's why you're undecided. But I think they are often, one issue is really important to them, and they're trying to gather all the information to see if that one issue should be the issue that will influence how they vote.
Let's talk about ballot questions, because that's something that's happening here in Massachusetts. There are 5 big ballot questions this fall that voters will have to answer. You took a look at at the process of getting, these onto the ballot, and really what drives people. Yeah. What does drive people to organize and get a question on the ballot?
Yeah, I think people who are mad, basically, about something try to get on the ballot. The thing that is the limiting factor is that often they just can't get something on the ballot because they don't get enough signatures, right? But yeah, I mean, one of the biggest challenges, I think, in ballots, and I'm sure you guys are dealing with this right now, is how they're framed, right? It can be called something that it's the opposite of what it's doing, and supporting it can be the opposite of what you think you're doing when you're voting.
You have to do your research.
Absolutely. People are so focused on the national election, they sort of forget about doing the deeper dive into the nuance of, well, what is this ballot issue exactly about? And if you say yes, you're saying yes to what? Are you saying yes to overturning it or yes to supporting it?
And so Matter of Fact with Soledad O'Brien airs every Sunday at 11:30, right after OTR, Ed.
Which brings us to the roundtable right now. It's time for the roundtable. So let's get to the lot that we have to get to. With us this morning, Democratic political analyst Marianne Marsh and Republican political analyst Rob Gray. Want to start with the vice presidential debate? Can we do it there? We'll start there. All right, bingo. Let's start with that. It's been described as civil, cordial, maybe overly so. Tim Walz struggled in the early going. J.D. Vance worked to soften the edges of MAGA. It wasn't until late in the debate and a discussion of the January 6th that a stark contrast became clear between the two candidates. 2 questions, Marianne and Rob. Too late? Did it matter?
Too late. Never was going to matter. We talked about that last week. And Vance looked up at one point, and I'm sorry, Walz looked up and it's like, I'm not in Mankato anymore. So he was very shaky in the beginning, good on policy, and then won it at the end on abortion and democracy. J.D. Vance, very good in the beginning, very slick, which we'll talk about, and he blew it on abortion and democracy. He couldn't even answer the question whether Trump had won in 2020. Right. None of it matters, but it revealed a lot about both of them.
I'll offer you the same thing, Rob. Was it too late in the debate, and does it really matter in the overall picture?
Well, overall, Walz was jumpy, Vance was solid, and the debate doesn't matter. I mean, it was good political entertainment. I think we all enjoyed it. The best punch went to Walz, though. I mean, as bad as he was in that debate, when he asked Vance, did Trump win in 2020? And Vance, dissembled. And he said, that's a damning non-answer. That was the moment of the debate.
That was as prompt and immediate as he was throughout the whole
Yeah, so as good
debate.
as Vance was, he kind of blew that. I mean, that's a tough question for Vance to answer, but Walz put it to him.
Yeah.
Walz seems comfortable in that role of the loyal sidekick, if you will, but did Vance make a more of a case for himself than Trump?
What we learned on the debate is just how dangerous J.D. Vance is going to be once Trump is off the stage. Lying is like breathing to him, and he was very, very good at it until the very end when he couldn't say when he couldn't say that Trump had
lying is like
lost
breathing
the race.
to Tim Walz. I mean, look at all the exaggerations. He got called out by the debate moderators on yet another lie and exaggeration about his record. I think Kamala Harris's war room watched that debate horrified at the Walz performance until that moment at the end and said to themselves, why didn't we pick Josh Shapiro,
The fact that
governor of
the
Pennsylvania,
fact, the
where
fact that,
it
that
could
Vance
actually matter and
couldn't
help us?
answer that question, to your point, an excellent point made by Walz, is disqualifying, because he would oversee the certification of the 2028 election if they get in.
All right, we are still seeing a razor-thin margin in the swing states. Will it take an October surprise? I don't know if it will work to change that dynamic. What do you think, Rob?
Well, let's look at where the race stands. It's super close, and either can win. So Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, we've been saying this all along. It really comes down to that. There is an electoral college advantage for Republicans that's developed. So when you see these national polls that Harris is ahead by a couple points, she really needs to be ahead by 3 or 4
More
points,
than a couple of points
to overcome that electoral college advantage. She may well do it, but don't count Trump out.
What do you
very,
think?
very close.
Kamala Harris has more options to get to 270 than Donald Trump does. That's the fact. And the trend has been her friend for some time now, pretty much since she got into the race, and there's still 30 days to go. So I think she's got a good advantage there. The reality is the October surprise is Donald Trump. And whether it's Bibi Netanyahu lighting the Middle East on fire or Putin continuing to do disinformation and interfering in our elections, that's the October surprise.
Liz Cheney joined Kamala Harris on the campaign trail last week. It, at least as a visual, it's more proof that this is an election cycle like no other. Because what did Cheney say? She'd never voted for a Democrat in her life, and she's going to vote for the vice president this time around. Marianne, was it political theater or was it something else?
Liz Cheney has more courage than every single Republican in the House and Congress, and most of them are men. She stood up for our country. She's a patriot. She stood up for the Constitution. She did the right thing, and it cost her everything, including her own personal safety. She lost her House seat. I can go down the list. That's not theater. Everyone in the country should stand up and give her a standing ovation, because she has done more to bring Donald Trump to account, including the January 6th committee investigation and the people who testified, like Cassidy Hutchinson. Liz Cheney is a patriot.
Rob?
I'm happy that Liz Cheney did it. I give her credit as well. It's a good moment for the Harris campaign. But let's remember, Liz Cheney also called Kamala Harris a radical. She called Kamala Harris Karl Marx. That's what she really believes. I think she endorsed Kamala Harris just because she cannot stand Donald Trump and what he did. If you gave her the true serum, she does not want Kamala Harris to be president, but that's the only choice.
And she's voting for her.
All right. Well, a new set of sweeping gun laws in Massachusetts is now in effect, weeks earlier than originally scheduled. Governor Healey filed an emergency preamble last week, which put the law on the books immediately instead of waiting until October 23rd. So advocates for gun ownership, they're gathering signatures in an effort to suspend the law. They have a deadline of October 9th. Opponents accuse the governor of subverting the democratic process. Did she, Marianne?
The pro-gun activists are the ones who subverted the democratic process. She did not. They're trying to stall this until they get, allegedly, to a ballot question in 2026. So we'll see you in 2026. Go have your ballot question. You get to vote in 2 years. The House, the Senate passed it. She signed it. It's law.
What do you think, Rob?
It's a political trick by the governor. There's a right that citizens have to repeal a law that's been passed if they get the signatures. That's what the gun owners are pursuing. If this was a different issue and the governor did this, let's say it was a liberal issue, people would be going nuts on the left.
Best week, worst week, and can we get by without talking about Nibby?